Montana Territory, 1878. A woman steps down from a mud-splattered stagecoach, clutching a crumpled letter bearing a stranger's signature. Her tired eyes survey the desolate landscape, searching for the man whose promises had lured her 2,000 miles from Philadelphia. Instead, she finds a valley submerged beneath spring floodwaters, where a prosperous cattle ranch should stand, and discovers that fate has crafted a future vastly different from the dreams she carried westward. The determination to overcome impossible odds, the will to rebuild from devastation, and the surprising revelation that sometimes life's greatest opportunities arrive disguised as its most crushing disappointments. This is the story of how two strangers, each bearing profound wounds, found healing in the most unexpected partnership. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. April downpours pounded the Montana plains as the weekly stagecoach from Helena lurched to a halt outside the Pineridge trading post. The hand-painted sign announcing the settlement's population of 93 souls hung askew from its post, the numbers fading like the promises that had brought Sophia Westfield to this remote frontier outpost. "Pineridge!" bellowed the driver, a gruff man called Simmons, who'd maintained a stony silence throughout the final day's journey. "End of the line, miss." Sophia pressed a handkerchief to her wind-chapped lips, tasting the bitter grit of prairie, dust that had infiltrated every fold of her clothing. At 26, with chestnut hair and eyes the color of autumn honey, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that concealed her mounting unease. The journey from Philadelphia had consumed 17 grueling days, each mile drawing her further from everything familiar and closer to a future that now seemed increasingly uncertain. "Is this all of Pineridge?" she asked, surveying the modest collection of weathered structures, a general mercantile, what appeared to be a saloon, a small whitewashed church, and perhaps a dozen scattered buildings that comprised the settlement. Simmons spat a stream of tobacco juice into the mud. Most of it. Floods took the rest. He gestured vaguely westward. "Rivers up 8 feet above normal. Worst spring deluge in memory." Sophia smoothed the wrinkles from her traveling dress. A practical navy wool that had once seemed suitable for her new life as a rancher's wife, but now felt as out of place as she did. She retrieved the letter from her reticule, the paper worn thin from repeated readings. "I'm to meet Mr. James Thornton. His ranch is—" "Thornton?" Simmons interrupted, his bushy eyebrows drawing together. "Ain't heard that name round these parts." A chill that had nothing to do with the rain crept along Sophia's spine. There must be some mistake. "I've been corresponding with Mr. Thornton for over 8 months. He owns a cattle ranch west of town." The stagecoach driver shrugged. "West of town is mostly underwater right now, miss, but I don't recall any Thornton with a ranch thereabouts. You might ask Sheriff Collins or Mrs. Wilson at the Mercantile. They know most everybody for 30 miles. Sophia's trunk and valises were unloaded from the coach roof, and before she could ask further questions, Simmons was climbing back to his seat, eager to reach the next settlement before nightfall. Within moments, the stagecoach was disappearing into the rain, leaving Sophia standing alone with her possessions in the deepening mud. "Need some help, ma'am?" A boy of about 12 approached, eyeing her luggage with entrepreneurial interest. "Yes, thank you," Sophia said, relieved to see a friendly face. "Is there somewhere I might wait while inquiring about transportation to the Thornton Ranch?" The boy's freckled face scrunched in confusion. "Thornton Ranch? Don't know any Thornton." He scratched his head. "Only ranch west of here that might still be standing is the old Davidson place, but that's Major Blackwood's land now, and half of it's probably underwater from what folks are saying." Unease blossomed into alarm in Sophia's chest. "I don't understand. I have 8 months' worth of letters from Mr. Thornton. He described his property in great detail." "Maybe Sheriff Collins can help," the boy suggested, already hoisting one of her valises. "He keeps track of land claims and such." The sheriff's office was a square wooden structure with a freshly painted sign. Inside, Sheriff Nathan Collins looked up from a desk scattered with wanted posters and weather advisories. "Something I can help you with, ma'am?" he asked, rising to his feet. "I hope so, Sheriff. I'm looking for James Thornton. I was to meet him today upon my arrival." Sophia fought to keep her voice steady. The sheriff's expression shifted subtly. "And you are?" "Sophia Westfield. Mr. Thornton and I have been corresponding for the past 8 months. I've come from Philadelphia to—" She hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. "To be his wife." Collins removed his hat, a gesture that immediately confirmed her growing fears. "Miss Westfield, I'm afraid there's no James Thornton in Pineridge or the surrounding county. Not now, and not in the 5 years I've been sheriff." The words struck Sophia like a physical blow. "That's impossible. I have his letters." She opened her reticule with trembling fingers, withdrawing a packet of correspondence, each envelope bearing the same neat masculine script: "James Thornton, Evergreen Ranch, Pineridge, Montana Territory." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sheriff Collins examined the letters, his frown deepening. "The handwriting is educated, I'll give you that. But I'm sorry to say you've been deceived, ma'am." "But why would anyone—" Sophia couldn't complete the question. The sheriff sighed. "It happens more than folks talk about. Some men write to Eastern women, spinning tales about prosperous ranches and comfortable lives. They take whatever money the women send for travel expenses, maybe keep up the correspondence long enough to request funds for wedding preparations, then disappear." Sophia sank into a chair, her mind racing. She had been careful, so careful. She'd insisted on corresponding for months before agreeing to travel west. Thornton's letters had been consistent, detailed, and seemingly sincere. He'd never directly asked for money, though she had sent funds to cover the wedding preparations 2 months ago. "Was there a Davidson ranch that the boy mentioned might be flooded?" she asked finally. "Yes, ma'am. Thomas Davidson's place, about 7 miles west. He died in the war between the states. His sister held it for a spell, then sold to Major Blackwood last autumn. Blackwood was working to restore it when the floods came." The sheriff shook his head. "River breached its banks, something fierce. Whole valley might be underwater." "I see." Sophia's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Miss Westfield, the Pioneer Hotel has clean rooms at reasonable rates. I'd suggest you take a day or two to consider your options before the next eastbound stage on Friday." The implication was clear. Return to Philadelphia, admit defeat, accept that she had been duped by a confidence man who had preyed on her vulnerability. "Thank you, Sheriff. I'll consider it." Outside, the rain had momentarily lessened to a drizzle. Sophia made her way to the Pioneer Hotel, a 2-story wooden structure that appeared to be the most substantial building in town. Inside, she arranged for a room and storage of her trunk. $1 secured her a small but clean chamber with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the town's main street. Once alone, Sophia finally allowed herself to absorb the magnitude of her situation. James Thornton didn't exist. The ranch he had described in such loving detail was fictional. The months of correspondence, the plans, the hopes, all built on falsehood. Her inheritance from her grandmother, the money that was to have given her independence from her uncles, suffocating household, was half spent on the journey west, and now she was stranded in a frontier town where she knew no one. She unfolded Thornton's last letter, reading it again by the fading daylight. "My dearest Sophia, as I write this, spring is bringing new life to Evergreen Ranch. The calves born last month have begun to find their legs, and the pines that border Our property are rich with promise. I've completed the improvements to the main house, including the library with floor-to-ceiling shelves that you requested. The bedroom faces east as you wished, to catch the morning light you so cherish. I count the days until April 12th, when I will finally meet you at the stagecoach. Look for a man in a brown hat with a silver band. I'll be the one with the most earnest smile, as I'll finally be welcoming home the woman whose letters have brought such joy to my solitary life. Until then, I remain faithfully yours, James. The details were so specific, so seemingly heartfelt. How could someone fabricate such sincerity? And more practically, what was she to do now? Returning to Philadelphia was the obvious answer, but the thought filled Sophia with dread. She had left her uncle's house with no intention of returning. Edward Westfield had made it abundantly clear after her parents' deaths that Sophia was an unwelcome burden, tolerated only because of her mother's modest inheritance, funds that now gave Sophia her only measure of independence. What Sophia hadn't told anyone in Philadelphia, what no one knew, was that her inheritance was considerably larger than her uncle suspected. Her maternal grandmother, a shrewd businesswoman who had scandalized Philadelphia society by running a successful textile import company after her husband's death, had secretly left Sophia a substantial sum held in trust until her 25th birthday. Sophia had accessed those funds just before departing for Montana, converting a significant portion to banknotes she carried carefully concealed in her belongings. Her plan had been to invest in Thornton's ranch, to be a true partner in building something substantial. Now that dream had evaporated like morning mist, leaving her alone with diminished but still considerable resources and no clear path forward. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. It was the hotel proprietress, a sturdy woman with kind eyes who introduced herself as Margaret Reynolds. "Thought you might like some supper, Miss Westfield. We serve meals downstairs, but you looked worn through from your journey." "That's very thoughtful. Thank you." Sophia accepted the tray of simple but appetizing food: roast venison, potatoes, fresh bread, and a slice of berry pie. Mrs. Reynolds lingered in the doorway. "Sheriff Collins mentioned your situation. I'm real sorry about that. Some men ain't got the decency God gave a rattlesnake. It seems not." Sophia managed a small smile. "If you're thinking of heading back east, stage fare's $20 to Helena, then there's the train from there." $20, a substantial sum, though well within her means. But returning meant facing her uncle's smug satisfaction, meant admitting defeat, meant surrendering the independence she had fought so hard to secure. "And if I weren't heading east?" Sophia asked carefully. Mrs. Reynolds considered this. "Well, Pineridge is growing. We get the cattle trade from the south, some mining business from up north. Town needs all sorts of services." "I have some experience with bookkeeping," Sophia offered. Her grandmother had insisted she understand every aspect of the textile business, unusual as that was for a woman. "That's something. Might talk to John Wilson at the Mercantile. His wife's been keeping the books, but with twins on the way, she'd welcome the help." Mrs. Reynolds smiled encouragingly. "Sleep on it. Things often look different in the morning light." After Mrs. Reynolds left, Sophia ate mechanically, her mind racing with possibilities. She had planned to keep her wealth secret to ensure James Thornton wanted her for herself, not her inheritance. Now that deception seemed unnecessary rather than prudent. If she stayed, she could build something for herself. If she claimed her full inheritance openly, she could potentially purchase a property, establish a business. But would a woman alone be accepted as a business owner in the Montana Territory? And how long before word reached Philadelphia? And her uncle came looking for what he believed was rightfully his to control. Sophia stepped to the window, gazing out at Pineridge as darkness fell. Lanterns were being lit along the main street, casting pools of golden light against the gathering gloom. The town was smaller than she had imagined, rougher, but there was something appealing in its straightforward nature. No pretense, no rigid social rules to navigate. A decision began to form. She would visit the flooded Davidson Ranch, now Blackwood's property, tomorrow. She would see for herself the land that James Thornton had described as if it were his own. Perhaps there, among the ruins of one false future, she might find the seeds of a real one. Morning brought clear skies for the first time in weeks. According to Mrs. Reynolds, after a breakfast of bacon and biscuits in the hotel dining room, Sophia arranged to hire a horse and wagon to take her to the Blackwood property. "Not much to see out there," warned the livery stable owner, a taciturn man named Fletcher. "Major's place is half underwater from what I hear. Man just can't catch a break." "Nevertheless, I'd like to see it," Sophia insisted. "Your $2. Fletcher shrugged, hitching up a sturdy mare to a small wagon. Road might not be passable all the way, rivers still running high. The journey took nearly an hour, following a rutted track that wound through gently rolling hills. Despite her circumstances, Sophia found herself captivated by the landscape's raw beauty, so different from Philadelphia's crowded streets and confined spaces. The vast prairie stretched to the horizon, carpeted with new spring grass and wildflowers that had emerged after the rains. They crested a small rise, and Fletcher pointed ahead. "There's the Blackwood place. What's left of it?" The scene below stole Sophia's breath. A river, swollen far beyond its normal banks, had transformed what should have been a valley into a sprawling lake. Where the ranch house should have stood, only the roof and upper story remained visible, rising from the floodwaters like a sinking ship. Several outbuildings stood on slightly higher ground, a barn with water reaching its lower walls, what appeared to be a bunkhouse and a workshop of some kind. A small cabin, perhaps for a foreman, stood on a rise just above the floodline, seemingly the only structure completely spared. "My God," Sophia whispered. "Is Major Blackwood—" "He's alive," Fletcher assured her. "Got his hands full trying to save what livestock didn't get swept away. Been sleeping in that cabin yonder." He shook his head. "Man fought through the whole war without a scratch, then comes home to lose an arm at the Battle of Little Bighorn, only to have his fresh start washed away. Ain't fair how life deals its cards." "Could you take me closer?" Sophia asked her, curiosity piqued by both the flooded homestead and its owner's history. Fletcher looked doubtful. "Road's underwater past that bend. Best I can do is take you to the high ground by that cabin. But Major Blackwood ain't the most sociable sort these days. Might not welcome visitors." "I'll take my chances." As they approached, Sophia could see signs of desperate efforts to salvage what could be saved from the flood. Furniture, tools, and supplies had been stacked on the small rise where the cabin stood. A corral had been hastily constructed, containing about a dozen cattle and several horses that had apparently been rescued from drowning. Fletcher brought the wagon to a halt at the edge of the dry ground. "This is as far as I can go. You want me to wait?" "Yes, please," Sophia said. "I won't be long." She picked her way carefully along the muddy path toward the cabin. There was no sign of anyone about, though smoke curled from the cabin's chimney. She was about to knock when the door swung open, and Sophia found herself face to face with Major Alexander Blackwood. Her first impression was of contained power. Tall and broad-shouldered, Blackwood moved with the careful precision of a man accustomed to command. His features might have been handsome once, before the war and whatever had happened at Little Bighorn had left their mark. His right sleeve was pinned neatly at the shoulder, and a scar ran from his left temple down his cheek. His eyes, a startling grey against his sun-darkened skin, regarded her with surprise that quickly shifted to wariness. "You're a long way from town, ma'am," he said, his voice deep with a rasp that suggested it wasn't often used for casual conversation, "and this isn't the best time for social calls." Sophia summoned her composure. Major Blackwood, I apologize for the intrusion. My name is Sophia Westfield. I arrived in Pineridge yesterday, expecting to meet someone who had described this property to me in great detail, only to discover that person doesn't exist, and the property was never theirs to describe. Blackwood's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps? Mail-order arrangement? Heat rose in Sophia's cheeks, but she nodded. Yes, happens more than folks care to admit. He glanced toward the flooded ranch house, though whoever described this place to you either has a vivid imagination or hadn't seen it lately. As you can see, it's more suitable for fish than cattle at the moment. Despite the grim circumstances, Sophia found herself appreciating his dry humor. The man called himself James Thornton. He wrote about a prosperous cattle ranch with a house that had, among other features, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Blackwood's mouth twisted in what might have been a smile under different circumstances. Davidson was more interested in cattle than books. House had 4 rooms and barely enough shelves for a Bible and an almanac. He studied her with new interest. You came all the way from Philadelphia based on letters from a man who doesn't exist, to marry him and live in a house that's currently under 6 feet of water. Put that way, Sophia had to acknowledge the absurdity of her situation. It wasn't my most prudent decision. To her surprise, Blackwood actually chuckled, a rusty sound as if rarely used. Life's rarely prudent, Miss Westfield. Best we can do is stay afloat when the floods come. He gestured toward the wagon where Fletcher waited. Your driver's looking anxious. Flash floods are still a risk with the ground this saturated. Sophia knew she should leave. This man had troubles enough without adding her predicament to his concerns. Yet something held her in place. Curiosity, perhaps, or the strange sense of connection to this property that James Thornton had inadvertently created through his detailed descriptions of a place he'd never seen. Major Blackwood, she said. Suddenly, I realize this is highly unconventional, but might I make a proposal? His eyebrows rose slightly, the scar on his temple whitening as his expression changed. I believe you've had enough proposals from strangers, Miss Westfield. A business proposal, she clarified quickly. I came west with capital to invest in the future. Those funds are still at my disposal, and your property, despite its current condition, has potential that might be realized with proper resources. Blackwood's expression shifted to disbelief. You're offering to invest in a flooded ranch you've just laid eyes on, owned by a man you've just met. I'm suggesting a possibility worth discussing once the immediate crisis has passed, Sophia amended. I have resources but limited knowledge of frontier life. You have knowledge and a property in need of rehabilitation. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he shook his head slowly. Miss Westfield, I appreciate the offer, however preliminary, but I've learned the hard way to be wary of solutions that appear too convenient. His gaze moved meaningfully to her fine clothing and city manners. Frontier life breaks more than property. It breaks people who aren't prepared for its challenges. The dismissal stung more than Sophia expected. I'm stronger than I appear, Major Blackwood. No doubt, but this is no place for a Philadelphia lady right now. He nodded toward the wagon. Go back to town. Take the eastbound stage. Find the life you deserve among civilized people. Before Sophia could respond, a shout came from the direction of the flooded pasture. A young man, little more than a boy, was racing toward them. Major, the North levee's giving way. Blackwood's entire demeanor changed instantly. The weary, somewhat cynical man vanished, replaced by a commander assessing a crisis. Get to the horses, Luke. Move the herd to higher ground. He turned to Sophia, all pretense at social niceties gone. You need to leave now. Sophia didn't argue. She hurried back to the wagon where Fletcher was already turning the horse around, his expression anxious. "Flash flood coming," he explained tersely as he helped her up. "River's changing course. We need to get to higher ground before the road's gone." As they pulled away, Sophia looked back. Major Blackwood was already mounting a horse one-handed, calling orders to the young man and another worker who had appeared from the barn. Despite his missing arm, he moved with confident efficiency, a man accustomed to crisis. The wagon had barely reached the ridge when Sophia heard a sound like distant thunder. Looking back, she saw a new surge of water breaching the makeshift levee, spreading across what little dry land remained around the cabin. Blackwood and his men were herding cattle and horses up the slope, racing against the rising water. "Will they be all right?" she asked Fletcher, who was urging the mare to a faster pace. "Blackwood's a survivor," the liveryman said grimly. "Man's been through worse than floodwater." As Pineridge came into view, Sophia made a decision. James Thornton's deception had led her to this place, but perhaps that wasn't the end of her journey. Perhaps it was just the beginning of something she couldn't yet imagine. For the first time since discovering the truth, Sophia felt a strange sense of purpose. Major Alexander Blackwood might not want her help, but the proud, battle-scarred cavalry officer and his drowning ranch represented something authentic in a way that James Thornton's fiction never could. Sophia Westfield had come west seeking a new life. She was still determined to find it, even if it meant building it from the waterlogged ruins of someone else's broken dreams. Sophia spent the next 2 days familiarizing herself with Pineridge. The town was small but determined, its residents displaying a frontier resilience that impressed her. She visited the mercantile where Mrs. Reynolds had suggested she inquire about bookkeeping work, and found John Wilson to be welcoming, if cautious. "Never hired a lady bookkeeper before," he admitted, examining the sample of her work. "But these figures are neater than anything I've managed, and Beatrice is in no condition to keep up with it now. His wife's advanced pregnancy with twins had confined her to bed rest. Can't pay much, $3 a week to start." It wasn't much, but it would extend her resources while she considered her next steps. "That would be acceptable, Mr. Wilson. When shall I begin?" "Monday suit you. I've got a backlog of invoices that need sorting." Sophia agreed, pleased to have secured at least temporary employment. The arrangement would provide not only income, but a window into the community's dynamics and needs, valuable intelligence if she decided to establish herself permanently. She was returning to the hotel when she noticed a commotion near the livery stable. A wagon had arrived from the direction of the Blackwood property, loaded with salvaged items. Major Blackwood himself stood beside it, his tall figure unmistakable even from a distance. He was speaking with Fletcher, his expression grim as he gestured toward supplies in the wagon bed. Sophia hesitated. Their last interaction had ended abruptly with his dismissal of her preliminary business proposal, yet curiosity and concern propelled her forward. "Major Blackwood," she greeted him. "I'm relieved to see you made it through the additional flooding safely." Blackwood turned, surprise briefly crossing his features before his expression settled into carefully neutral lines. "Miss Westfield, still in Pineridge, I see." "For the moment. I've secured employment with Mr. Wilson at the mercantile." Something that might have been approval flickered in his eyes. Practical decision. "I tend toward practicality when circumstances allow." She glanced at the wagon's contents, furniture, tools, books, all bearing water damage to some degree. "Were you able to save much?" "Enough." Blackwood's tone wasn't encouraging of further questions, but Sophia persisted. "The cabin, did it survive the second flood?" 4 inches of water inside, but the structure's sound." He studied her with that direct gaze that seemed to evaluate everything it touched. "Why the interest, Miss Westfield?" Sophia chose her words carefully. Perhaps because I spent months imagining a life connected to that property, albeit under false pretenses, or perhaps because I recognize the potential that remains despite current circumstances. Blackwood's mouth tightened. Potential? That's a luxury for those with resources to realize it. Resources aren't limited to financial capital, Major, Sophia countered. Knowledge, experience, and determination are equally valuable. A sound that might have been a suppressed laugh escaped him. You've certainly got determination, Miss Westfield. I'll grant you that. Fletcher, who had been watching their exchange with poorly concealed interest, cleared his throat. If you're serious about accommodations, Major, the old Morgan cabin at the edge of town is vacant. Nothing fancy, but it's dry. Blackwood nodded. I'll take it. Need somewhere to store what's salvageable and house my men until the waters recede. He glanced at Sophia. Good day, Miss Westfield. Best of luck with your new position. The dismissal was polite, but firm. Sophia watched as he organized the unloading of his wagon, directing his two workers, the young man she'd seen before, whom she now heard addressed as Luke, and an older man with a pronounced limp who appeared to be the ranch foreman. Despite his missing arm, Blackwood worked alongside them, his movements precise and economical. Man's too proud to ask for help, Fletcher muttered beside her. Lost nearly everything, but he's still thinking about his hand's welfare before his own. You seem to know him well, Sophia observed. Served under him in the 7th Cavalry, different as night and day. Him, an educated officer, me, just a private. But he treated every man fair. Saved my life at Little Bighorn. Fletcher touched his leg. Got me out when I took an arrow through the thigh. Then he went back for Jenkins and took that saber cut across his face and the bullet that took his arm. The casual mention of such violence startled Sophia, though she tried not to show it. That's why he left the cavalry? She asked. Fletcher shook his head. Couldn't stay with one arm? Army wouldn't have him, though he fought to. Man's stubborn that way. This glimpse into Blackwood's past lent a new dimension to the taciturn rancher. Sophia found herself reassessing her initial impression. Not just a frontier homesteader who'd encountered misfortune, but a man who'd faced extraordinary violence and emerged with wounds both visible and concealed. That evening, unable to settle, in her hotel room, Sophia walked to the town's small church. Not for services. The simple wooden building stood empty in the twilight, but for the perspective its small hill offered. From here, she could see the entire town, and beyond it, the distant valley where Blackwood's flooded ranch lay. Miss Westfield, isn't it? Sophia turned to find a slender man in clerical attire approaching along the church path. He had a thoughtful face and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Reverend Thomas Parker, he introduced himself. I noticed you at services on Sunday. Yes, I've been attending since my arrival. Sophia had found the simple service comforting in its familiarity, so different from the ornate ritual of her Philadelphia church, yet sharing the essential elements. Seeking answers in the sunset? He asked, joining her at the viewpoint. Perhaps direction more than answers. Ah, the Reverend nodded. I understand you came to marry a man who proved fictional. News traveled quickly in small communities. Word gets around. It does indeed, though I suspect there's more to your story than a matrimonial disappointment. His perception was unsettling. What makes you say that? Most women in your situation would have departed on the next eastbound stage. Yet here you are, securing employment, attending services, studying our little community with those observant eyes. His tone held no judgment, merely curiosity. Sophia found herself unwilling to dissemble with this perceptive man. I came west, seeking a new beginning. The fact that it won't be the one I anticipated doesn't negate the need for it. I see. The Reverend seemed to weigh his next words carefully. And does this new beginning involve Major Blackwood's property? The question startled her. Why would you think that? You've been watching the valley since I arrived, and I couldn't help but notice your conversation with the Major earlier today. He smiled gently. Small towns have many eyes, Miss Westfield. Sophia sighed. I made a preliminary business proposal that Major Blackwood firmly rejected. He believes I'm unsuited to frontier challenges. Alexander Blackwood judges people quickly but not always accurately, Reverend Parker observed. His experiences have left him wary of entanglements, financial or otherwise. You know him well? We served together, though I was a chaplain, not a fighting man. I witnessed the toll command took on him, especially after Little Bighorn. The Reverend's expression sobered. It wasn't a battle so much as a massacre. Women and children among the dead. Alexander never reconciled himself to his role in it, though he saved as many as he could. The revelation cast Blackwood's taciturn nature in a new light. Is that why he left the cavalry? His injury made continued service impossible, but yes, I believe he sought redemption in creating rather than destroying, building a ranch, raising cattle, bringing life instead of death. The Reverend gestured toward the distant valley. The flood is more than a material setback for him. It's a spiritual one. Sophia considered this perspective thoughtfully. Everyone speaks of Major Blackwood's competence and courage, yet he seems isolated. Does he have no family to support him? His parents are deceased. There was a fiancée in Virginia before the war, but when Alexander returned wounded, she had married another. Reverend Parker studied Sophia with sudden intensity. May I offer an observation, Miss Westfield? Of course. You and Alexander Blackwood have more in common than either of you realizes. Both seeking new beginnings, both accustomed to self-reliance, both carrying burdens others can't see. The insight was uncomfortably accurate. Major Blackwood made it clear he doesn't want my involvement in his affairs. What Alexander wants and what he needs are often different matters. The Reverend smiled. Just something to consider as you seek your direction. Their conversation shifted to more general topics, the community's history, the challenges of frontier ministry, the surprising cultural diversity among Pineridge's small population. But Sophia found her thoughts repeatedly returning to Blackwood and his flooded ranch. By the time she returned to the hotel, a plan had begun to form, one that would require careful implementation if it were to succeed where her direct approach had failed. Morning found Sophia at the mercantile earlier than required for her first day of work. John Wilson was surprised but pleased by her promptness. Beatrice organized most of our system, he explained, showing Sophia to a small desk in the store's back room. But with spring buyers coming through when the new mining supplies arrived from Helena, it's gotten away from us. The work was straightforward, if tedious. Sophia sorted invoices, reconciled accounts, and organized the chaotic ledger into something more manageable. By noon, she had already made significant progress and earned Wilson's undisguised appreciation. You're a godsend, Miss Westfield, he declared. Beatrice has been worrying herself sick over these accounts, which ain't good for her condition. I'm happy to help, Sophia said sincerely. Then, choosing her words carefully, I noticed Major Blackwood purchased quite a lot of building supplies back in March. Has he settled his account recently? Wilson's expression clouded. Hasn't been in since the flood. Man's got enough troubles without me pressing him for payment. Of course, Sophia kept her tone neutral. I only asked because I'm trying to understand the store's major accounts. Blackwood's good for it, Wilson assured her. Always pays his debts, just might take time with everything washed away. The confirmation of Blackwood's financial strain strengthened Sophia's resolve. After completing her day's work, she visited the town's small bank, where she transferred a portion of her funds from banknotes to a local account. The banker, a pinch-faced man named Morris, made little effort to hide his surprise at a woman managing such transactions independently. "Your husband must trust you greatly with his affairs, Miss Westfield," she corrected firmly. "The funds are my own, Mr. Morris." His eyebrows rose nearly to his receding hairline. "Indeed, how unusual." Sophia smiled pleasantly. "I find that unusual circumstances often yield the most interesting opportunities, don't you?" From the bank, she proceeded to Widow Simmons's boarding house, where she had learned many of the town's business matters were informally conducted. The widow, a formidable woman of 60 who had outlived 2 husbands and managed their combined properties with impressive acumen, received Sophia in a parlor crowded with mismatched furniture and frontier trophies. "So, you're the Philadelphia mail-order bride without a groom," the widow said without preamble. "Margaret Reynolds says you've got more backbone than most men around here, staying on after such a disappointment." "Mrs. Reynolds is kind," Sophia replied, "but I'm here to discuss a business matter. I understand you hold the note on the old Morgan cabin where Major Blackwood is currently residing." The widow's shrewd eyes narrowed. "What's your interest in Alexander Blackwood, Miss Westfield?" "A business interest. I have capital to invest in promising opportunities." "And you consider a half-drowned cattle ranch promising?" The widow's tone was skeptical. "Or is it the man himself you find promising?" Sophia refused to be baited. "The property has excellent water access. Ironically, given current circumstances, good grazing land once it dries out, and a strategic location between cattle country and the railroad. With proper investment, it could become significantly more valuable." Widow Simmons studied Sophia with new appreciation. "You've done your research." "I make it a practice to understand investments before committing to them." "Smart woman." The widow nodded approvingly. "Yes, I hold the Morgan note. Blackwood's paying weekly for the cabin and storage space in my old barn for what he's salvaged from the flood. I'd like to purchase that note, along with information on any other outstanding debts Major Blackwood may have in town." The widow's eyebrows shot up. "Planning to own the man through his debts doesn't seem your style, Miss Westfield." "I have no intention of using financial leverage against Major Blackwood," Sophia clarified. "Quite the opposite. I plan to clear his most pressing obligations so he can focus on rebuilding without immediate financial strain. Anonymously, for the moment, the Major has made it clear he doesn't welcome assistance, particularly mine." Widow Simmons chuckled. "Man's pride is as sturdy as that granite jaw of his." She considered Sophia thoughtfully. "You know, most women looking to catch a husband go about it with pies and sympathy, not by purchasing his debts." "I'm not looking to catch anyone, Mrs. Simmons. I'm pursuing a sound business opportunity while helping someone who deserves better than the hand fate has dealt him." The widow's expression suggested she had her own interpretation of Sophia's motives. "Well, I have no objection to selling the note if the price is right. As for Blackwood's other obligations—" She rose and moved to a small secretary desk. "I keep track of who owes what around town, call it a hobby." By the time Sophia left the boarding house, she had arranged to purchase not only the Morgan cabin note, but also Blackwood's outstanding accounts at the mercantile, the blacksmith, and the lumber mill. The total was substantial, but not extreme, nearly $280, which would be transferred discreetly over the coming days. Her next stop was the land office, where she reviewed the county records regarding the Blackwood property. The title was clear, purchased outright from Thomas Davidson's sister the previous autumn. The water rights were extensively documented, confirming what Sophia had begun to suspect. The property's greatest value wasn't its grazing capacity, but its control of water, access to several surrounding ranches. Armed with this knowledge, Sophia made one final visit before returning to her hotel room, to Reverend Parker at the church parsonage. "I need advice on helping someone who doesn't want to be helped," she explained after the Reverend invited her in. "Alexander Blackwood," he surmised immediately. "Yes, I've learned more about his financial situation, which is precarious, though not yet desperate. I have the means to alleviate some of that pressure, but he's made it abundantly clear he doesn't welcome my involvement." Reverend Parker considered this thoughtfully. Alexander has carried burdens alone for so long, he's forgotten how to share them. His injury, the nightmares from Little Bighorn, the struggle to build something meaningful, all faced in isolation because he believes connection leads to vulnerability, and vulnerability to pain. Then how do I help without triggering that? Resistance. Find a way to make your assistance more than charity. Alexander can accept a fair business arrangement, but not what he perceives as pity. The Reverend studied her. "May I ask why this matters so much to you, Miss Westfield? You've only just met the man." It was a question Sophia had asked herself repeatedly. "Perhaps because I understand what it means to build something from nothing, to prove oneself in the face of doubt." She hesitated, then added more softly, "Or perhaps because, like the Major, I know what it is to face the world alone." Reverend Parker nodded slowly. "Just be careful, Miss Westfield. The waters around Alexander Blackwood run deeper and more turbulent than those currently flooding his ranch." The week that followed established patterns that would shape Sophia's new life in Pineridge. By day, she managed the mercantile's books, with increasing responsibility as John Wilson recognized her aptitude. Evenings were spent at the Pioneer Hotel, revising and refining her plans based on new information gleaned about both the community and the Blackwood property. She saw Major Blackwood occasionally in town, typically at the livery stable or lumber mill, securing supplies for ongoing salvage efforts. She was careful not to appear too interested, limiting their interactions to polite nods when their paths crossed. Through Fletcher and Reverend Parker, however, she learned that Blackwood and his men were making progress, recovering livestock that had survived and beginning repairs on the less damaged outbuildings. On Friday, Sophia received word from Widow Simmons that all the transactions had been completed. Blackwood's most pressing debts had been cleared, with the creditors understanding only that an anonymous investor had purchased the notes as part of a larger territorial development strategy. "He'll figure it out eventually," the widow warned when Sophia visited to finalize the paperwork. "Alexander's no fool. By then, I hope to have demonstrated the sound business principles behind my actions," Sophia replied. The widow snorted softly. "Business principles, is that what they're calling it these days?" Before Sophia could protest this interpretation, the parlor door opened and a tall figure entered, Major Blackwood himself, his expression thunderous. "Mrs. Simmons, I've come to discuss—" He stopped abruptly upon seeing Sophia. "Miss Westfield, I didn't realize you were acquainted with the widow." "Miss Westfield and I were just concluding some business," Widow Simmons said smoothly, gathering the papers on her lap into a folder. "Something about territorial development investments. All very proper and Philadelphia-like." Blackwood's gaze moved between them, suspicion dawning in his eyes. "What kind of investments?" Sophia rose, recognizing that retreat was the wisest course. "Nothing that would interest you, Major. Good day, Mrs. Simmons. Thank you for your assistance." She moved toward the door, but Blackwood didn't step aside. "What have you done?" he asked quietly, his voice carrying an edge that hadn't been present in their previous encounters. Sophia met his gaze directly. "Created an opportunity, Major, for both of us. I don't want your charity. It isn't charity. It's investment. One that will benefit me as much as you." She squared her shoulders. But this isn't the place for such a discussion. If you wish to hear my proposal, my full proposal, I'll be at the church viewpoint at sunset. Without waiting for his response, she slipped past him and departed, heart racing not from fear, but from anticipation. The confrontation she had both sought and dreaded was finally at hand. Sophia arrived at the church viewpoint early, giving herself time to compose her thoughts before the crucial conversation ahead. The sun hung low on the horizon, painting the distant floodwaters in shades of gold and crimson. From this vantage point, she could see that the waters had begun to recede, revealing muddy fields where once there had been a lake. She was arranging her thoughts into logical arguments when she heard footsteps on the path behind her. Major Blackwood approached, his expression still stern but with something else beneath it, curiosity perhaps, or reluctant respect. "You've been busy, Miss Westfield," he said without preamble. "I believe in efficient use of time, Major. And money, it seems. Widow Simmons wasn't particularly discreet about your investments. My debts to the mercantile, lumber mill and blacksmith have all mysteriously vanished." Sophia faced him squarely. "I acquired those obligations as part of a larger investment. Strategy. What strategy could possibly involve the debts of a man whose ranch is half underwater and whose prospects at best are uncertain? A strategy based on actual value rather than current appearance." Sophia gestured toward the distant valley. "Your property controls water access to 3 surrounding ranches. The Davidson grant includes senior water rights to the entire eastern watershed. That alone makes it valuable regardless of temporary flooding." Blackwood's expression shifted from irritation to surprise. "You've done your research." "Always, which is why I now understand exactly what James Thornton was attempting, albeit dishonestly." Sophia's voice hardened slightly. He recognized the property's strategic value, but lacked the means to acquire it legitimately. So he created a fictional identity, courted an Eastern woman with potential resources, and planned to use those resources to secure the property. Yet knowing you were nearly defrauded, you still want involvement with the same land. The land's value is real even if Thornton wasn't, and unlike him, I plan to proceed honestly and ethically. She met his gaze directly. "I propose a partnership. I will provide capital for immediate rebuilding and livestock replacement. You provide the knowledge and labor to restore the ranch to working condition. We share ownership and profits proportionally." Blackwood studied her with those penetrating grey eyes that seemed to detect any hint of deception. Why would a Philadelphia lady choose mud and hardship over comfort and society? There must be easier investments available to someone with your resources. It was the central question, the one Sophia had asked herself repeatedly. The honest answer surprised even her. "Because I don't want easy, Major Blackwood. I want something meaningful." She gestured toward the town below them. "In Philadelphia, I was decorative, a well-bred lady whose value lay in her potential as a suitable wife. Here, I can build something tangible, something that's mine by right of effort, not birth or marriage." Her candor seemed to catch him off guard. He turned away, gazing toward his flood-damaged property. "Frontier life is harder than you imagine," he said finally. "Brutal winters, isolation, physical demands few Eastern women have faced. I'm prepared to learn what I don't know. And if you find the reality doesn't match your expectations, then I will have failed honestly on my own terms, rather than succeeded by meeting others' limited expectations of me." Blackwood was silent for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, a brief expression that transformed his scarred face, and hinted at the man he might have been before war and hardship had marked him. "You're either remarkably brave or dangerously naive, Miss Westfield." "Perhaps a measure of both," she admitted, "but I'm also practical. This proposition benefits us equally. You need capital to rebuild properly before winter. I need knowledge and connection to establish myself in this territory. Blackwood considered her words with the careful deliberation she had come to recognize as characteristic. If, and I emphasize if, I were to consider such an arrangement, I would require clear terms, written and legally binding. Hope surged through Sophia, though she kept her expression measured. Of course, I wouldn't propose a business arrangement without proper documentation. And no charity, he added firmly. Equal effort for proportional returns based on investment. I won't be any woman's project or salvation. The statement revealed more about his past wounds than perhaps he intended. Agreed. Partners, not savior. And saved. He nodded once, decision apparently made. I'll consider your proposal formally, draft the terms as you see them, and I'll review them with appropriate amendments. It wasn't full acceptance, but it was progress. I'll have documents. Prepared by Monday, Sophia promised. As they walked back toward town in the gathering twilight, Sophia sensed a subtle shift in their dynamic. Blackwood's rigid formality had eased slightly, replaced by thoughtful consideration. How did you come to understand water rights so thoroughly, in such a short time? He asked. I visited the land office and examined the property records. The clerk was quite informative once I expressed interest in territorial water law. Blackwood raised an eyebrow. Most women wouldn't consider property records stimulating reading material. My grandmother believed women should understand the legal foundations of ownership, Sophia explained. She ran a textile business after my grandfather's death and encountered numerous attempts to undermine her authority through legal technicalities. Your grandmother sounds like a formidable woman. She was. Sophia smiled at the memory. She used to say, men make laws assuming women won't read them, prove them wrong at every opportunity. For the first time, Blackwood laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise him as much as her. Sound advice for frontier living as well. They parted at the hotel with formal courtesy but newfound understanding. Sophia watched him walk toward the Morgan cabin, his tall figure silhouetted against the last light of day. For the first time since arriving in Pineridge, she felt truly certain of her course. The weekend passed in a flurry of preparation. Sophia spent Saturday drafting partnership terms, carefully balancing her financial contribution against Blackwood's labor and expertise. She consulted Pineridge's circuit lawyer, a sharp-minded woman named Harriet Coleman, who defied convention by practicing law in the territory. This is unusually equitable for a business document, Coleman observed, reviewing Sophia's draft. Most investors would demand controlling interest. I'm interested in sustainable success, not control, Sophia explained. Major Blackwood's knowledge is as valuable as my capital in this context. The lawyer's eyes twinkled. And the Major, himself, is he a factor in this equation? Sophia maintained her composure, despite the warmth rising in her cheeks. Our relationship is strictly professional. Coleman made a notation on the document. Well, regardless of motivation, this is a sound agreement. I've made some adjustments to strengthen the mutual commitment and clarify dissolution terms, should they become necessary. Sunday morning found Sophia in church, seated several pews behind Blackwood and his ranch hands. She noted that despite his financial strain, he had contributed to the collection plate, a small but revealing gesture that confirmed her assessment of his character. After services, Reverend Parker introduced them formally to several prominent townspeople, including the mayor and his wife. The introductions carried symbolic weight. The Reverend was effectively giving his blessing to their potential association, both business and personal. You've made quite an impression in a short time, Blackwood observed, as they left the churchyard. The Reverend doesn't bestow his approval lightly. We've had several thoughtful conversations, Sophia replied. He's helped me understand Pineridge, beyond its obvious characteristics. Blackwood nodded, then hesitated before speaking again. If you're available, I'd like to show you the property properly. The waters have receded enough to access most of it now. The invitation represented significant progress. I'd appreciate that. When did you have in mind? Tomorrow afternoon. I can have Fletcher bring a wagon. That would be perfect. Monday morning, Sophia completed her work at the Mercantile, with particular efficiency, organizing 2 weeks of backlogged invoices before noon. John Wilson was increasingly impressed with her capabilities. "Never seen the books in such fine order," he declared. "Beatrice is feeling better knowing everything's being handled properly." "I'm glad to help," Sophia said sincerely. "Would it be possible for me to leave early today? I have a business matter to attend to this afternoon." Wilson readily agreed, and by 1 o'clock Sophia was changing into her most practical dress, a deep brown cotton with minimal bustle and sensible boots beneath. She had just descended to the hotel lobby when Fletcher arrived with the wagon. "Major's meeting us at the property," he explained as he helped her aboard. "Had some fencing that couldn't wait." The journey to the Blackwood Ranch revealed significant changes from Sophia's first visit. The floodwaters had receded substantially, leaving behind mud-caked fields and debris tangled in fence lines. Work was already underway. Blackwood and his men were rebuilding a section of fencing near what had been the main pasture. Blackwood lifted a hand in greeting as they approached, then came to meet the wagon. His shirt was rolled to the elbows, revealing a powerful right arm bronzed by the sun. Despite his missing left arm, he moved with the natural grace of a man comfortable with physical labor. "Good afternoon, Miss Westfield," he said, helping her down from the wagon with a strong, calloused hand. "Thank you for coming. I thought you should see exactly what you're proposing to invest in before we finalize any agreements." The thoroughness of his tour impressed Sophia. He showed her everything, not just the promising aspects, but the significant challenges. The main house would require extensive rebuilding, having stood in 4 feet of water for nearly 2 weeks. The barn needed a new floor and reinforced walls. Fencing throughout the property needed replacement. The flooding actually helped in one respect, Blackwood explained, leading her to a ridge overlooking the eastern pasture. It exposed weaknesses in the original water management system. With proper channels and retention ponds, we could better control flow through the property, minimizing future flood damage while maintaining water access for neighboring ranches. Creating a more reliable water source would increase the property's value to those neighbors, Sophia observed. Blackwood nodded approvingly. "Exactly. They currently pay modest access fees, but would likely pay more for guaranteed flow levels, especially during dry seasons." His willingness to include her in strategic thinking represented a significant shift in their dynamic. He was no longer merely tolerating her interest, but engaging with her as a potential partner. As they walked the property, Blackwood gradually revealed more of his vision for the ranch. He had extensive plans for breeding quality cattle suited to the territory's specific conditions, rotating pasture use to maintain grass quality, and eventually adding horses to the operation. "The cavalry taught me something about horseflesh," he admitted. "There's a market for well-trained mounts throughout the territory, not just quantity, but quality." "You have a comprehensive vision," Sophia said, genuinely impressed. "I can see why this setback has been so difficult. You were building something significant." "Am building," he corrected firmly. "This flood is a delay, not a defeat." His resilience was remarkable. Despite losing so much, his determination remained unbroken. Sophia found herself increasingly convinced that her investment would be sound, not just financially, but in terms of the partnership itself. After touring the property's perimeter, Blackwood brought her to the small cabin that had survived the flooding with minimal damage. Inside was spare but meticulously organized, with a stone fireplace, rough-hewn table and chairs, and shelves, holding books that had been carefully dried after their rescue from the main house. "The foreman's cabin," Blackwood explained. "I've been using it while assessing what can be salvaged from the main house." Sophia noticed a set of architectural drawings pinned to one wall, detailed plans for rebuilding the ranch house on higher ground with improved structural elements. "Your work?" she asked, examining the precise draftsmanship. "I studied engineering before the war," Blackwood explained, a hint of self-consciousness in his tone. "It proved useful in cavalry service and now in civilian life." "These are impressive," Sophia said sincerely. "You've incorporated drainage systems beneath the foundation, a precaution against future flooding. The original house was built too low in the valley." Sophia studied the plans, noting practical features combined with unexpected touches of refinement. Large windows positioned to capture morning light, a proper library with built-in shelves, a covered porch wrapping around 3 sides. "This design reflects considerable thought," she observed, "not just function, but comfort." Blackwood's expression softened slightly. "A home should be more than mere shelter. That's a lesson military life teaches thoroughly." The comment offered another glimpse into the man behind the reserved exterior, someone who valued beauty and comfort despite his practical nature. Sophia found herself increasingly intrigued by these contradictions. As they sat at the rough table, reviewing her partnership proposal, Blackwood raised surprisingly few objections to her terms. His amendments were reasonable: specific performance requirements on both sides, clear timelines for capital investment and property improvements, and detailed profit distribution mechanisms. "You've been more than fair," he acknowledged, reviewing. "The final revisions. Most investors would demand controlling interest, given the property's current condition." "I'm not most investors," Sophia replied, "and control without knowledge is foolish in this context. Your experience is as valuable as my capital." Blackwood studied her for a long moment. "Miss Westfield, Sophia, I must ask again. Are you certain this is what you want? This life will bear little resemblance to Philadelphia society." The use of her given name didn't escape her notice. "I'm certain, Major Alexander. I came west seeking a new life. This partnership offers exactly the opportunity I hoped to find." Their eyes met across the table, understanding passing between them that transcended business considerations. Then Blackwood nodded once, decisively. "Very well, we have an agreement." They formalized it with signatures and Harriet Coleman's legal witness 2 days later. By sunset on Wednesday, Sophia Westfield and Alexander Blackwood were official business partners in what the document termed Blackwood and Westfield Ranch and Water Company. As they stood on the porch of the foreman's cabin, watching the last light fade from the valley, Blackwood turned to her with unexpected gravity. "There's something you should know before we proceed further," he said. "The flooding wasn't entirely natural. There's evidence that someone deliberately weakened the northern levee." Sophia's shock must have shown on her face. "I found tool marks on the remaining structure," he explained. "Someone wanted this property to fail. But who would do such a thing? And why?" Blackwood's expression hardened. "That's what we need to discover, because whoever did it likely isn't finished yet." This revelation cast their partnership in an entirely new light. They weren't just rebuilding a flood-damaged ranch. They were potentially facing an adversary determined to see them fail. The knowledge should have frightened Sophia. Instead, she felt a strange sense of resolve strengthening within her. "Then, we'll face that challenge together as well," she said firmly. Blackwood studied her with new appreciation in his gaze. "You continue to surprise me, Sophia Westfield." "Good," she replied with a small smile. "I believe partnerships thrive on the occasional surprise." News of the partnership between Sophia Westfield and Major Alexander Blackwood spread through Pineridge with remarkable speed. By Friday morning, everyone from the bank teller to the blacksmith seemed to have an opinion on the arrangement. "Bold move," commented John Wilson when Sophia arrived for her morning bookkeeping work. "Not many would invest in that property after such flooding." "I believe in looking beyond current circumstances to underlying value," Sophia replied diplomatically. Wilson nodded thoughtfully. "Blackwood's a good man, straight as an arrow. If anyone can make that land productive again, it's him." Not everyone shared this positive assessment. Sophia overheard whispers as she moved through town on her errands. Some curious, others decidedly skeptical. "Eastern lady playing at ranching. Won't last a month when winter comes. Blackwood must be desperate to take female money." She ignored the comments, focusing instead on the practical aspects of their new venture. Her first step was transferring agreed-upon funds to the joint account they had established. The bank manager, Herbert Morris, made little effort to hide his surprise when she presented the transaction paperwork. "This is most unusual, Miss Westfield. Are you certain you wish to proceed with such significant investment without more established guidance?" "Major Blackwood provides all the guidance necessary for this venture, Mr. Morris. His knowledge of ranching and territorial conditions is extensive." Morris adjusted his spectacles nervously. "Yes. Well, there are other considerations beyond practical knowledge. Standing in the community, business connections, financial stability, all of which our partnership addresses admirably," Sophia interrupted smoothly. "Now, if you would please complete the transfer as specified." The banker complied reluctantly, his disapproval evident in every measured movement. As Sophia was preparing to leave, the bank's door opened to admit a distinguished-looking man in his 50s, impeccably dressed in a manner that seemed out of place in the frontier town. "Ah, Mr. Harrington," Morris called, his tone immediately warming. "Perfect timing. Allow me to introduce Miss Sophia Westfield, recently arrived from Philadelphia. Miss Westfield, this is Spencer Harrington, president of the Territorial Development Company." Harrington approached with practiced charm, extending his hand. "Miss Westfield, a pleasure. We don't often see Eastern refinement in our humble territory." "Mr. Harrington." Sophia accepted his handshake with polite reserve, noting the assessing quality of his gaze, similar to how her uncle had evaluated potential business acquisitions. "I understand you formed some manner of arrangement with Major Blackwood regarding his unfortunate property," Harrington continued. "Most enterprising of you." The comment carried an undercurrent that Sophia couldn't quite identify. Not quite condescension, not quite threat, but something hovering between the two. "Business partnerships are common in developing territories, I believe," she replied neutrally. "Indeed, though some ventures offer better prospects than others." Harrington's smile remained fixed. "My company has extensive interests in Montana's development, railroads, water rights, town planning. Should you ever seek more substantial investment opportunities, I'd be delighted to discuss them. Thank you for the offer, Mr. Harrington. For now, I'm quite satisfied with my current arrangements." "Of course." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Though circumstances do change, especially in frontier settings, best to maintain flexibility." The exchange left Sophia unsettled, though she maintained her composed exterior until she had completed her business and departed. Outside, she nearly collided with Blackwood, who was emerging from the saddle shop across the street. "You've met Harrington," he observed, noting her expression. "Just now at the bank. He seems interested in our partnership." Blackwood's mouth tightened. "Harrington's interested in anything he doesn't control. His development company has been Buying water rights throughout the territory, he offered to purchase my property twice before the flood, at considerably below market value. The information crystallized Sophia's vague discomfort into specific concern. "Do you think he could be connected to the levy tampering?" "It's crossed my mind," Blackwood admitted, lowering his voice. "He certainly benefits from my difficulties, but it's a serious accusation without proof." They moved away from the main street, continuing their conversation with greater privacy as they walked toward the mercantile. "What do you know about him?" Sophia asked. "Former railroad man, made his fortune in land speculation back east, then brought his capital west after the war. He controls most of the new rail spur construction and has significant influence with territorial officials." Blackwood's expression was grim. "Not a man to cross without considerable resources and allies." Sophia absorbed this assessment, mentally cataloguing Harrington as a potential adversary. "Then we should focus on securing additional allies of our own." "My thoughts exactly." Blackwood gestured toward the mercantile. "I need to place orders for rebuilding supplies. Care to accompany me? Wilson respects your business acumen." The invitation, natural and collegial, reflected their rapidly evolving partnership. Sophia found herself appreciating the ease with which Blackwood included her in practical matters, treating her neither as a delicate flower nor as merely a source of capital. Inside the store, they reviewed lumber requirements and hardware necessities for the initial rebuilding phase. Sophia's careful accounting and Blackwood's practical knowledge complemented each other efficiently, impressing Wilson with their organized approach. "You two work well together," the storekeeper observed as he totaled their substantial order, "like you've been partners for years instead of days." Before either could respond, the store door opened, admitting an elegantly dressed woman whose fashionable attire seemed jarringly out of place in the frontier setting. She surveyed the store with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to assessing social situations quickly, her gaze lingering on Blackwood before shifting to Sophia. "Alexander, what a delightful surprise," she said, moving toward them with graceful confidence. "I heard you were in town today." Blackwood straightened, his expression carefully neutral. "Miss Harrington, I didn't realize you had returned from St. Louis. Father sent for me once he decided to make Pineridge his base of operations." Her smile was practiced perfection. "The territorial legislature has appointed him to the Water Commission, so we'll be staying indefinitely." The family connection to Spencer Harrington was immediately evident, not just in her name, but in the assessing quality of her gaze. Beautiful but calculating, like a chess player evaluating potential moves. "Miss Westfield," Blackwood said formally, "allow me to introduce Miss Clara Harrington. Miss Harrington, Miss Sophia Westfield, recently arrived from Philadelphia." "How interesting." Clara extended a gloved hand. "Another Eastern transplant. Though I maintain connections to civilization through frequent visits, the frontier becomes tedious without occasional refinement." "I find it invigorating," Sophia replied, meeting the subtle challenge in Clara's tone. "Full of unexpected opportunities." "Yes, I've heard about your arrangement with Major Blackwood." Clara's perfectly arched eyebrow conveyed volumes of unspoken judgment. "Most entrepreneurial of you." Blackwood cleared his throat. "Miss Westfield has shown remarkable business insight regarding territorial development potential." "Has she?" Clara's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Father will be fascinated, I'm sure. In fact, you must both attend our gathering this Saturday evening. We're hosting a small dinner for territorial officials and select local residents. Nothing elaborate, merely 20 or 30 guests." The invitation was clearly strategic rather than social. Sophia glanced at Blackwood, whose expression suggested he recognized the underlying dynamics as well. "Thank you for the invitation," Sophia said before Blackwood could decline. "We would be delighted to attend." Clara's surprise flickered briefly before her social mask reasserted itself. "Wonderful. 8 o'clock at our residence, the former Peterson Mansion at the north end of town. Father has had it extensively renovated." After she departed in a rustle of expensive silk, Blackwood turned to Sophia with a raised eyebrow. "That was boldly done. The Harrington gathering will be a viper's nest of territorial politics." "Precisely why we should attend," Sophia replied quietly. "If Harrington opposes our venture, better to understand his methods and allies directly. Besides, these events are where alliances form. We need support beyond Pineridge if we're facing opposition from someone with his influence." Blackwood studied her with new appreciation. "You navigate these waters with remarkable skill for someone recently arrived. Philadelphia society prepared me well for political maneuvering, if nothing else," Sophia admitted. "The stakes may differ, but the strategies remain similar." That evening, Sophia visited Widow Simmons to seek her insight regarding the upcoming Harrington gathering. The older woman received her in the now familiar cluttered parlor, offering tea and shrewd counsel in equal measure. "So, you've met Clara?" the widow said, pouring steaming liquid into mismatched cups. Ambitious creature, had her eye on several prosperous prospects before settling on Alexander as her primary target. "Target?" Sophia kept her tone neutral, despite the unexpected stab of something that felt disconcertingly like jealousy. "Certainly. Decorated war hero with engineering education and substantial property holdings, including critical water rights. He's quite the matrimonial prize despite his injury." The widow's eyes twinkled knowingly. Clara began her campaign before the floods, sending invitations, appearing whenever he came to town. Alexander remained politely distant, which only increased her determination. "And now? Now you've appeared, young, educated, possessing your own resources, and forming a partnership that gives you a claim on the very property Clara covets through her father's ambitions." Widow Simmons chuckled softly. "You couldn't have designed a more perfect challenge to her aspirations had you intentionally scripted it." Sophia absorbed this assessment thoughtfully. "The Harringtons seem to have considerable influence here. Spencer cultivates power like other men cultivate crops," the widow confirmed. "Railroad connections, banking interests, political appointments, he collects them systematically. Clara serves as his social ambassador, charming and gathering. Intelligence in equal measure. Formidable opponents indeed." The widow sipped her tea contemplatively. "And now they're hosting you at their showcase residence, where territorial officials will evaluate the newcomer who has aligned herself with the man who stands between Harrington and complete water right control in the western county." "When you describe it that way, it sounds rather daunting," Sophia admitted. "Good." Widow Simmons set down her cup decisively. "Being daunted leads to proper preparation. Now what are you planning to wear?" The question was unexpected, but practical. Sophia described her finest dress, a deep blue silk with modest bustle and lace trim. The widow shook her head firmly. "Too Philadelphia, too understated. You need to establish yourself as Alexander's equal in this gathering, not appear as an Eastern curiosity." She rose with surprising spryness for her age. "Come with me." In a back bedroom, Widow Simmons opened a cedar chest containing garments from an earlier era. She withdrew an emerald green silk dress with sophisticated styling that somehow managed to bridge Eastern refinement and Western practicality. "My daughter's, before she moved to San Francisco with that banker husband of hers," the widow explained. "She was about your size. This made quite an impression at the territorial governor's reception last year." Sophia touched the fabric reverently. "It's beautiful, but I couldn't possibly—" "Nonsense. Consider it a loan in service of a worthy cause." The widow's expression softened. Alexander Blackwood deserves an ally who can stand her ground in any company. This dress makes a statement without a word being spoken. 2 days later, Sophia found herself climbing the steps to the Harrington mansion on Blackwood's arm, the emerald dress complementing her chestnut hair and projecting exactly the confident image Widow Simmons had intended. Blackwood himself looked remarkably distinguished in formal attire that emphasized his military bearing despite his missing arm. "You look beautiful," he had said simply when he collected her from the hotel, the straightforward compliment more affecting than elaborate. Flattery might have been. The Harrington residence proved as impressive as rumored. A 2-story structure with columned porch and extensive gardens illuminated by gas lamps that must have required considerable expense to install in the frontier town. Inside, crystal, chandeliers and imported furnishings created an atmosphere of transported Eastern luxury. Spencer Harrington greeted them with practiced hospitality, though Sophia noted how his gaze lingered assessingly on her emerald gown. "Miss Westfield, Major Blackwood, welcome to our humble attempt at civilization in the wilderness." "Your home is impressive," Sophia acknowledged, "though I find the natural beauty of Montana Territory equally compelling in its way." "How charmingly adaptable of you," Clara commented, appearing at her father's side in a gown of sapphire blue that undoubtedly represented the latest St. Louis fashion. Most Eastern ladies require considerable time to appreciate frontier aesthetic virtues. The subtle competition was immediately established. Sophia met it with composed confidence, her Philadelphia upbringing providing ample preparation for such social sparring. The gathering included exactly the influential mix Widow Simmons had predicted: the county judge, territorial legislators visiting from the capital, wealthy ranchers from surrounding properties, and the railroad administrator, responsible for the new spur line planned for the region. Each was strategically cultivated by the Harringtons, with Clara ensuring conversation groups formed and reformed to their advantage. Sophia observed these dynamics carefully while maintaining her own social presence with practiced skill. She noted which territorial officials deferred to Harrington and which maintained independence. She registered the subtle tensions between established ranchers and Harrington's development ambitions. Most importantly, she witnessed the community's reaction to Blackwood. Respect from the working ranchers, cautious assessment from the politicians, and thinly veiled resentment from Harrington himself whenever Blackwood spoke knowledgeably about territorial water management. During dinner, Sophia found herself seated between the county judge and the territorial water commissioner, a placement that seemed designed to test her knowledge of frontier legal and development issues. She met the challenge with poise, drawing on her research and careful listening to contribute meaningfully to the conversation. "Miss Westfield displays remarkable understanding of water right priorities," the commissioner observed, genuine surprise in his tone. "Most newcomers require months to grasp these complexities. Miss Westfield has made a thorough study of territorial statutes," Blackwood commented from across the table. "Her insights regarding sustainable development have proven invaluable to our partnership." The comment drew subtle reactions around the table, raised eyebrows, exchanged glances, and a momentary tightening of Clara's perfect smile. "How fascinating," Clara interjected smoothly. "Though surely theoretical knowledge differs from practical experience, the recent flooding of Major Blackwood's property demonstrates how unpredictable frontier conditions can be, despite the best planning." "Actually," Sophia replied calmly, "the flooding highlighted weaknesses in the original water management system, weaknesses our partnership is now addressing through improved engineering. Major Blackwood's designs incorporate innovative drainage solutions that could benefit multiple properties along the watershed." The Territorial Water Commissioner leaned forward with genuine interest. I'd be most interested in reviewing these. Designs, Major. The Commission is evaluating improved standards for flood mitigation throughout the territory. Before Blackwood could respond, Spencer Harrington smoothly redirected the conversation. Speaking of territorial improvements, Commissioner, I've prepared those development prospectus materials you requested. Perhaps we might review them in my study after dinner. The subtle power struggle continued throughout the evening. Sophia and Blackwood presented a united front, navigating the complex social and political currents with complementary strengths. His direct knowledge and respected military background paired with her social adeptness and quick intelligence. As the gathering concluded, Harrington drew Blackwood aside, while Clara engaged Sophia in seemingly pleasant conversation. "Your partnership with Major Blackwood is certainly unconventional," Clara observed, her tone light but her eyes calculating. "One wonders how long such an arrangement might last in these challenging conditions." "Strong foundations withstand significant pressures, Miss Harrington," Sophia replied. "We're building something designed to endure." Clara's perfect smile remained fixed, but something hardened in her gaze. "How optimistic. Though in my experience, Eastern transplants often discover the territory holds unexpected hardships that test even the strongest resolve." The comment carried unmistakable warning beneath its social veneer. Before Sophia could respond, Blackwood rejoined them, his expression carefully neutral, though tension was evident in his bearing. "We should take our leave," he said quietly to Sophia. "It's growing late." Their departure was conducted with proper civility, but Sophia sensed an underlying shift in the evening's dynamics. Once they were in the carriage returning to town, she turned to Blackwood inquiringly. "Harrington made another offer for the property," he explained, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Significantly higher than before, with thinly veiled implications about the consequences of refusing." "What sort of consequences?" "The usual frontier pressures, difficulty securing supplies, problems with cattle buyers, complications with water access for neighboring ranches." Blackwood's jaw tightened. "He also suggested that a woman of your refinement would inevitably tire of frontier hardships and return east, leaving me without capital to complete the necessary improvements." Sophia's indignation flared. "How presumptuous!" "Indeed." Blackwood turned to her, moonlight illuminating his scarred face. "Though it raises a question I've been reluctant to ask. What assurance do I have that you won't reconsider when winter comes and conditions grow harsh?" The question stung, though Sophia recognized its legitimacy. "The same assurance you offer me. Our legal partnership, our mutual investment, and my word." She met his gaze directly. "I don't abandon commitments, Alexander. Not when they matter." Something shifted in his expression, doubt giving way to cautious belief. "The Harringtons won't make this easy for us." "I never expected easy," Sophia replied, surprising herself with her certainty. "But I did expect it to be worthwhile. Nothing about that has changed." As they continued toward town, Sophia reflected on the evening's revelations. They had confronted Harrington's opposition directly and emerged with a clearer understanding of the challenges ahead. They had also identified potential allies in the territorial commissioner and several neighboring ranchers who resented Harrington's expansionist ambitions. Most significantly, she and Blackwood had presented themselves as true partners, each contributing strengths to their shared venture. The foundation they were building extended beyond business into something Sophia wasn't quite ready to name, but increasingly couldn't deny. The frontier was indeed testing her resolve, just as Clara had warned, but not in the way the sophisticated saboteur had intended. The test wasn't whether Sophia would abandon her commitment to Blackwood and the ranch, but whether she could acknowledge the deeper connection forming between them amid the external pressures they faced. As Blackwood helped her from the carriage, at the hotel, his hand lingered on hers slightly longer than necessary. "Thank you for tonight," he said quietly. "You were remarkable." The simple compliment warmed her more than elaborate praise might have. "We make a good team, Major Blackwood." "Indeed we do, Miss Westfield." His rare smile transformed his features in the lamplight. "Indeed we do." The weeks following the Harrington gathering brought significant progress to the Blackwood and Westfield partnership. With Sophia's capital and Blackwood's direction, reconstruction began in earnest. The barn was completely restored, new fencing installed around critical pastures, and foundation work started for the rebuilt main house. Most importantly, Blackwood's innovative water management system took shape, with drainage channels and retention ponds strategically placed to control future flooding. Sophia divided her time between bookkeeping for Wilson's Mercantile and active participation at the ranch. She maintained her room at the hotel, but spent most daylight hours on the property, learning ranch operations with determined focus. Blackwood proved a patient teacher, explaining livestock management, grass rotation principles, and water distribution systems. "You're a quick study," he observed one afternoon as they inspected newly constructed drainage channels. "Most experienced. Ranchers take years to understand watershed dynamics." "I have an excellent instructor," Sophia replied, noting with satisfaction how naturally they now worked together, their initial wariness replaced by genuine collaborative respect. Their personal relationship evolved alongside their business partnership. Blackwood gradually revealed more of himself, glimpses of the educated, thoughtful man beneath the taciturn exterior. Sophia found herself increasingly drawn to his quiet strength, principled character, and unexpected moments of dry humor. November brought crisp mornings and golden afternoons, perfect weather for continued construction. The main house progressed steadily, its foundation and frame rising on higher ground beyond potential flood reach. Sophia took particular interest in this aspect of reconstruction, consulting with Blackwood on practical elements, while adding refinements that would transform the structure from mere shelter to genuine home. Not everyone viewed their progress favorably. Spencer Harrington's development company suddenly raised freight rates for building materials coming through their rail depot. Lumber deliveries mysteriously arrived damaged or incomplete. The territorial bank, where Harrington held significant influence, began questioning their loan application for additional cattle purchases, despite Sophia's substantial collateral. "Harrington's testing our resolve," Blackwood noted grimly after their bank appointment, "had been cancelled for the third time, creating obstacles to see if we'll abandon the project." "He underestimates our determination," Sophia replied, her initial Philadelphia reserve now tempered with frontier pragmatism. And they did find alternatives. Widow Simmons introduced them to independent freight haulers who bypassed Harrington's rail depot. Neighboring ranchers, increasingly resentful of Harrington's water access fees, offered cattle trading opportunities that didn't require bank financing. Each challenge strengthened their partnership and deepened community connections with others who resisted Harrington's growing control. On a brilliant late November morning, Sophia arrived at the property earlier than usual, eager to review plans for the house's interior finishing. She found Blackwood already working with Luke, the young ranch hand, measuring timber for window frames. "You're here early," Blackwood greeted her, his rare smile warming his features. "Eager to choose wallpaper patterns," she teased. "Practical flooring options, actually," she corrected with an answering smile, "though I do have some thoughts about the library shelving." They spent a productive hour reviewing interior specifications, their preferences aligning with surprising consistency. Both favored simple, quality materials over ornate decoration, though Sophia insisted on certain refinements. Larger windows for natural light, a proper kitchen with adequate workspace, built-in storage throughout to maximize efficiency. "This will be a home worth returning to after long days," Blackwood observed, studying the modified plans. Something in his tone caused Sophia to look up sharply. "You sound surprised." He was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "I suppose I am. When I purchased this property, I envisioned a functional ranch house, serviceable, practical. This—" he gestured to their collaborative design. "This is something more." "Something more substantial," Sophia suggested. "Something more permanent," he amended, meeting her gaze with unexpected directness. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken significance. Then young Luke appeared at the doorway, breaking the quiet connection. "Major Blackwood!" The boy's face was flushed with exertion. "Riders coming! Looks like Sheriff Collins and some others." Blackwood moved immediately to the window, his posture changing almost imperceptibly, the ranch owner giving way to the cavalry officer, assessing a potential threat. 4 riders, he noted. "Sheriff, Morris from the bank, and 2 I don't recognize." He turned to Sophia, his expression carefully controlled. "Perhaps you should wait inside while I greet them." "We're partners," she reminded him firmly. "I'll stand with you." Something like pride flickered in his eyes before he nodded once. They met the approaching riders at the newly constructed corral fence, presenting a united front. Sheriff Collins, a weathered man with a perpetually concerned expression, dismounted first. Major Blackwood, Miss Westfield, he acknowledged them with a touch to his hat brim. "Sorry to disturb your morning, but we've got official business." "What kind of business?" Blackwood asked evenly. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. "These gentlemen have papers regarding this property." He nodded toward one of the unrecognized riders. "This here's Mr. Grant, attorney representing the Territorial Development Company." The man stepped forward, a thin man with precise movements and cold eyes. "Major Blackwood, Miss Westfield, I represent Mr. Spencer Harrington in a matter of some legal urgency." He extracted documents from his saddlebag with flourish. "These papers formally contest your ownership claim to water rights on this property. Mr. Harrington has evidence that the original Davidson grant was improperly executed and that senior water rights actually belonged to the development company through prior territorial assignment." Blackwood accepted the documents with outward calm, though Sophia noted the tightness around his eyes. "The Davidson grant was fully validated when I purchased the property. The water rights are clearly established in county records." "Newly discovered documents suggest otherwise," Grant replied smoothly. "The territorial court has granted a temporary injunction prohibiting any further water management construction, pending full hearing next month." Sophia's mind raced. Stopping construction now, with winter approaching, would set their progress back by months, potentially leaving the property vulnerable to spring flooding again. "May I see those papers?" she asked calmly, extending her hand. Grant hesitated before passing them over, his expression suggesting surprise at her involvement. Sophia reviewed the documents carefully, her grandmother's training in business matters allowing her to quickly identify the critical language. "This injunction applies only to new construction directly affecting water flow," she noted. "Our current improvements are largely complete, and the house construction doesn't fall under these restrictions at all." Grant's expression tightened. "The intention is to halt all significant development until ownership is clarified." "The intention may be so, but the legal language is specific," Sophia countered firmly. "We will, of course, comply with the precise terms while preparing our response to these claims." The attorney's surprise at her legal knowledge was poorly concealed. Mr. Harrington anticipated you might take that position. He authorized me to present an alternative. He withdrew another document. A purchase offer for the property at current valuation, allowing you both to recover your investments without further complications. Blackwood's jaw tightened visibly. Not interested. Major Blackwood, Miss Westfield, be reasonable, Morris from the bank interjected. Mr. Harrington's offer is more than generous, given the property's troubled history and current legal questions. We find the timing of these newly discovered documents remarkably convenient, Sophia observed, appearing just as our improvements demonstrate the property's true potential. Sheriff Collins shifted uncomfortably. I'm just here to deliver the papers official-like. Court says construction affecting water flow stops until the hearing. We understand, Sheriff, Blackwood said. We'll comply with the legal requirements while preparing our defense. After the riders departed, Blackwood studied the documents with grim focus. This is Harrington's move. He created enough obstacles to test our commitment, and when we overcame them, he escalated to legal manipulation. Can he actually claim the water rights? Sophia asked. Not legitimately. The Davidson grant is solid. I verified every aspect before purchasing, but territorial courts can be influenced, and Harrington has considerable political connections. Blackwood looked toward the partly finished house, calculation in his gaze. We need to adjust our strategy, focus on completing the house and essential ranch structures while we fight this legally. Sophia nodded agreement. I'll contact Harriet Coleman immediately. We'll need comprehensive legal representation. They spent the afternoon reorganizing construction priorities and reviewing resources. Their practical response to crisis reflected the strength of their partnership. No recriminations or panic, just collaborative problem-solving and shared determination. As sunset approached, Sophia prepared to return to town. Blackwood walked her to her horse, his expression troubled. There's something I haven't told you, he said quietly. Something that may be relevant to our situation. Sophia waited, sensing his struggle with some private burden. During the war, before Little Bighorn, I served briefly with Spencer Harrington's son, William. Blackwood's voice held careful neutrality. He was a junior officer assigned to my company, inexperienced, overconfident, traits that can be deadly in combat. He paused, the scar on his face seeming more pronounced in the fading light. During a skirmish near the Yellowstone, William led a reckless charge against my direct orders. He was killed, along with 3 other men. Understanding dawned. Harrington blames you. He filed a formal complaint questioning my command decisions, suggesting I had deliberately endangered his son. The military investigation cleared me completely, which only increased his resentment. Blackwood's gaze met hers directly. I should have told you earlier that our conflict with Harrington might be more personal than business. Would it have changed our partnership? Sophia asked. It might have given you second thoughts about aligning yourself with someone Harrington specifically resents. Or it might have strengthened my resolve to stand with you against unjust persecution, she countered. We can't know theoretical outcomes, Alexander. We can only address our current reality. His expression softened at her use of his given name. You're remarkably adaptable, Sophia Westfield. Necessity is an excellent teacher, she replied with a small smile. The following morning brought no respite from their challenges. Sophia arrived at Wilson's Mercantile to find the proprietor unusually subdued. Something wrong, Mr. Wilson? She asked as she settled at her desk. Wilson glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. Had a visit from Harrington's man yesterday, said they're considering opening a company store that would supply all the regional ranches at lower prices than independents can manage. Threatening your business, Sophia concluded. Exactly, and mentioning specifically that supplying your ranch might not be in my long-term interest. Wilson looked genuinely distressed. I've got nothing against you and the Major, quite the opposite, but with twins coming and Beatrice's health still delicate. I understand completely, Sophia assured him. You must protect your family. First, by midday, similar reports emerged throughout town. The blacksmith, lumber supplier, and feed merchant had all received veiled warnings about doing business with Blackwood and Westfield Ranch. Harrington was systematically isolating them from essential services. Sophia sent an urgent message to Blackwood, who arrived in town by mid-afternoon, his expression grim as she explained the situation. Textbook intimidation, he said after hearing the details. Harrington's applying pressure to every vulnerable point in our operation. They retreated to Widow Simmons's parlor for privacy, the older woman offering both tactical tea and strategic counsel. Harrington's using his territorial connections effectively, she observed, though he's overplayed his hand with the local merchants. Pioneers resent outside pressure, even when they must temporarily bend to it. We need supplies and services regardless, Blackwood noted practically. Winter's approaching, and the house must be habitable before the first heavy snow. Sophia had been thinking furiously. What about Fort Benton? It's within reasonable freighting distance, outside Harrington's immediate influence, and has competition among suppliers. Possible, Blackwood acknowledged, though transportation costs would increase significantly. I might have a solution for that, Widow Simmons interjected. My late first husband's brother runs a freight operation between Fort Benton and Helena, always looking for return trip cargo. Could give you favorable rates. This practical alternative lifted their spirits momentarily, but the broader implications remained sobering. Harrington was demonstrating both the reach of his influence and his willingness to use it destructively. As they discussed contingencies, a commotion erupted on the street outside, voices raised in alarm, running footsteps, and someone shouting about fire. They rushed to the window to find smoke billowing from the direction of the hotel, Sophia's temporary home. They hurried outside to find townspeople already forming a bucket brigade from the town well to the hotel, where flames licked upward. From the first floor, Sheriff Collins directed the firefighting efforts, while hotel guests gathered their rescued belongings in the street. "My room!" Sophia gasped, seeing flames near her second-floor window. "Stay here," Blackwood ordered, already moving toward the burning building. "Alexander!" she called after him, but he had disappeared into the smoke. Agonizing minutes passed as the bucket brigade battled the spreading fire. Finally, Blackwood emerged, coughing but intact, carrying Sophia's trunk and valise. "Your belongings," he managed between coughs, setting them down before her. Most seems untouched by smoke. Relief flooded her, not for the saved possessions but for his safe return. "You could have been killed," she admonished, examining a burn on his forearm with concern. "Calculated risk," he replied with typical understatement. "Your documents were too valuable to lose." As they watched the firefighting efforts continue, Sheriff Collins approached, his expression troubled. "Fire started in the storeroom," he reported. "Margaret Reynolds says lamp oil was spilled near stacked linens. Not her usual practice." "Deliberate," Blackwood concluded grimly. "Can't prove anything," the sheriff cautioned. "But timing seems mighty convenient, what with you folks facing troubles already." Sophia's missing room key, discovered absent from her reticule that morning, and assumed misplaced, suddenly took on more sinister significance. "This has gone beyond business rivalry," Blackwood said quietly as the sheriff moved away. "Harrington's escalating to dangerous tactics. He's trying to drive me away," Sophia realized. "Destroy my residence, isolate us from supplies, create legal obstacles, all to break our partnership and force you to sell. And in doing so, he's crossed a line." Blackwood replied, grim determination in his voice. Threatening legal maneuvers is one thing, endangering lives is entirely different. That evening, with Sophia's hotel room uninhabitable from smoke damage, Widow Simmons insisted she take a room at the boarding house. Proper and respectable, with the added benefit of my shotgun by the door, the widow noted practically. As Sophia settled her salvaged belongings, a knock at the door revealed Blackwood, his expression uncharacteristically uncertain. "I've been thinking," he began without preamble. "These attacks are escalating, and they're increasingly focused on you as the means to break our partnership." "I've reached the same conclusion," Sophia acknowledged. "Then perhaps—" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Perhaps you should consider returning east until the situation stabilizes. Your capital is already invested, our partnership legally established. You could monitor from a safe distance while I manage on-site operations." The suggestion, though practically framed, struck Sophia with unexpected force. "Are you asking me to leave?" "I'm suggesting a tactical retreat for your safety," he clarified, "not abandonment." Sophia studied him carefully, noting the genuine concern beneath his controlled expression. "And if I refuse this suggestion?" Something shifted in his gaze, worry giving way to a different emotion entirely. "Then we face Harrington together, with full acknowledgement of the increased risks." "I didn't come west seeking safety, Alexander," she said quietly. "I came seeking purpose and independence. Our partnership provides both. I won't abandon it, or you, because of Harrington's tactics, however dangerous." Blackwood's expression transformed, the careful reserve giving way to naked admiration. "You continue to surprise me, Sophia Westfield." "Good." She smiled despite the gravity of their situation. "Predictability is vastly overrated." His answering smile faded quickly, as he returned to practical matters. "If you're staying, we need to accelerate our counter-strategy. I've been considering a direct approach to the territorial governor, bypassing Harrington's local influence. The water commissioner we met at Harrington's gathering seemed receptive to your engineering innovations," Sophia recalled. "Could he provide an introduction to the governor?" "Possibly, though we'd need compelling evidence of Harrington's illegal tactics." As they discussed possibilities, a new realization formed between them. They were no longer merely business partners defending a property investment, but allies committed to each other personally as well as professionally. The distinction was unspoken but undeniable, hovering in the careful way Blackwood checked her well-being and the trust with which Sophia accepted his strategic guidance. Harrington's escalation had forced an unexpected crystallization of their relationship, bringing clarity to feelings that had been developing since their first contentious meeting at the flood-damaged property. The threat had not weakened their connection, but strengthened it, revealing its true depth and significance. As Blackwood prepared to leave, he paused at the doorway. "Whatever happens next, Sophia, I want you to know that our partnership, in all its dimensions, has become more valuable to me than the property itself." The simple declaration, characteristic in its straightforward honesty, warmed Sophia deeply. "For me as well, Alexander." He nodded once, understanding passing between them without need for elaborate expression. They were united now in purpose and feeling, facing whatever challenges came next, as true partners in every sense. The fire had failed to drive Sophia away. Harrington's next move would undoubtedly prove more dangerous, and their response would need to be equally bold. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.